Hi, I'm Jen Fine, and I am the CEO and co-founder of YouLi to Travel, and we're the creators of the YouLi platform, which is the best way to organize group trips. So we are hosting this webinar today to help people understand how to take control of their tech stack. So this is a problem that's not just for travel businesses, but obviously all of our examples are going to be sort of travel oriented. And one of the things I'm going to be asking you guys to do is a little bit of an exercise to follow along. So Vika's going to put the this link into the chat in Zoom, and we're going to email it out afterwards as well. And this form is basically just kind of following along with the content that I'm going to be presenting, but it's meant to help you think about your tech stack and really start to get an understanding of all the technology that you use and how it all fits together. So as you can see, it's a pretty long list. So you're not necessarily going to finish it all today during the webinar, but that's why it's a worksheet for you to kind of work on at your own pace and time. And of course, if you're interested in going through this on a one-on-one consultation, you can just reach out to us after the fact. So this session is really meant to help you kind of understand some core concepts and really give you a framework for thinking about how you bring technology into your travel business. So we're going to start off with a little bit of an inspiration, which is to say, don't be afraid of your technology. I know a lot of travel people are offline people. They like the real world. They like tangible things. Totally get it. But if you open yourself up to the fact that technology has become incredibly accessible and allow yourself to learn just a few tricks, you'll find that you can take control of your tech stack. And where you can't do it yourself, learn how to ask the right questions so you're working with the right partners. So one of the most important things is don't start with the technology, start with the problem and a clear goal of what you're trying to solve in your business. And then second of all, finding a cost-effective solution that can scale with you. So recognizing that oftentimes when you're getting started, there's a lot of shiny things out there. You probably can't afford them all, nor is it the right time for you to be taking on a huge amount of technology. So sometimes simpler is better, but you do need to think about how it's going to change and scale with you. So if it is a difficult thing to change, then you might want to integrate something more complicated at the beginning. But if it's something that's relatively easy to change out, then start small and change it later. And that kind of feeds into the idea of adding to your tech stack over time. Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say, and neither will your tech stack. So you're going to be constantly involving the technology that you use to power your business. And so you should just think about it that way. You should be thinking about each year, and especially at the end of the year, and you're thinking about all your plans for 2020, thinking about what technology makes sense to bring into your business this year, and how's that going to layer on? Or is this the year that you're finally going to change something over that you've been wanting to change over? But think about it kind of in that same layered way, you know, so maybe you're tearing down a building and putting a new one up. Maybe you're just putting some ornaments on an existing building, however you want to think about it. The most important thing is giving yourself permission to take control of your tech stack. So this is where I want you to jump into that exercise. So your tech stack is a combination of all the platforms and technologies that you use in your business. Now, the thing that's really changed over the last decade is that it used to be that you couldn't have technology unless you had IT staff. And as most of you know, because most of you don't have dedicated IT staff, that's not true anymore. There are all these platforms out there that allow you to actually have incredibly powerful technology at your fingertips, and you don't have to know any code. And in some cases, you don't even need someone technical to help you. Usually their support will be enough to get you to the point that you need to. And that allows you to scale to the point where maybe you do need to take on dedicated tech staff. So these are just a few examples. And really what I'd like you to do is to think about these in the context of which ones you actually use. And one that I'd really like to start with and emphasize, because it's been coming up a lot recently, is a password vault. Now, this is something that's often kind of like an afterthought rather than a first thought. Usually people start with like registering their domain and getting their email hosting set up, and that's great. But the thing is that your email account ends up being the key to your kingdom. So pretty much every platform you use, when you sign up with an email address, if you need to reset your password, they're going to send you an email verifying that you are the owner of that email account. So what happens if that email account gets hacked? It means all your technology has been hacked, because they then have access to change the password on all the platforms that you've used that email address on, which is why you should have a different password on every single piece of technology that you use. And there's no way that a normal human is going to be able to remember all that. So you have to get what's called a password vault. These are solutions that vary from platform to platform, but Keychain is the one I recommend if you're a Mac user. Like all good Mac products, it just works on both your iPhone and your Mac, and it syncs all your passwords that you store on Safari, and it will generate complicated passwords for you that you don't need to remember. All you need to remember is your password for your Mac and your thumbprint for your iPhone. So that is an incredibly easy way to do it. If you're working in a team, I recommend something like LastPass or 1Password, where you can actually share passwords securely with your team. And those have their own sort of pros and cons, and you'll need to check them out yourself. But no matter what, Password Vault needs to be really high on your list. If you don't have one already, put it as your first sort of goal for January 2020 is to get that integrated into your business, because the cost to your business of having your systems hacked because of a weak password is way too high. So spend the hour and get yourself set up with a Password Vault. So while I've been kind of talking, hopefully you've been kind of going through and sort of thinking about all of these different things that you're using. And if you're checking a lot of these boxes, then it really means that it's probably time to do an assessment of how all of these play together. And hopefully you're checking one of these boxes soon that includes YouLi. So now I want to jump into the what's your problem. So now you've kind of got in your head all of these pieces of technology that you have, and you're thinking, wow, I have a lot already, and yet I still feel like maybe I haven't solved all my business problems. Well, before you become overwhelmed, step back and say, okay, what's the problem that I'm looking for technology to solve? Is that problem monetizing my audience, finding new customers, or scaling operations? So let's dig into each of those. So if your problem is finding new customers, now every business has this problem, but is it the number one problem for you? Is probably the best way to look at this. Now, this can be the most expensive problem to have of the three that we're talking about. And that can mean optimizing your Google search with content creation. It could be, automating your social media content. It could be working with partners to get paid articles written, or the most expensive of all, marketplaces. So if you have a small kind of experience, you can put that up on Airbnb, for example, but they'll take 20% of that transaction. And of course, what you're looking for here is leads that convert. So when you're evaluating these kinds of solutions, don't just be thinking, let me just throw something at it. Think to yourself, who do we really want to get? If we're acquiring new customers, not just leads, but leads that convert, you actually need to dig into the data. And that data is going to be things like, what's your audience? So you're going to need Google Analytics to tell you the kinds of people that actually convert. And that's how you know whether or not it's worth paying that 20% to get those bookings from a marketplace. So the next one is monetizing your audience. Lucky you. If you have this problem, this is the best kind of problem. It means you spent all your time building up an incredibly engaged audience, whether on social media or maybe offline, and you are very well respected within that audience. And so now it's time to take all that attention and turn it into bookings. So this is something that you can do with ads. You can do retargeting to that audience if you have things set up correctly. You can work with affiliates. So if you're a travel blogger and you want to drive traffic to your affiliates, like booking.com or something like that, you can get codes that way. And of course, tours. And that's where we specialize. If you have an audience that you're looking to monetize and you want to put those tours up on a platform with a low booking fee, that's where YouLi comes in. And of course, in this case, you're looking for customer experience. They're already bought into you as a brand. And so you just want to make it really, really easy for them to actually purchase the things that you're selling to them. So customer experience is going to be a number one criteria for picking a tech solution if monetizing your audience is the problem. And finally, If scaling operations is your problem, that's brilliant because that means you're growing. But unfortunately, growth doesn't feel like success if it's not managed well. Sometimes growth can actually feel kind of like failure because everything is just going crazy. This can be particularly challenging if you've started with spreadsheets. So you'll know that you need to search for a platform when your spreadsheet gets out of hand and you've brought on a team member and they don't understand all your codes in the spreadsheet. CRMs are a great solution at this point when you're starting to scale operations. And of course, specific platforms, again, like YouLi for the multi-day tour case. And in this case, you're going to be looking for automation. So scaling operations is about not having to manually respond every time someone registers, but actually having a system that sends out a confirmation and prompts them to take their next steps. So you don't have to be awake at 2 in the morning when they register, but you can still be driving action to that person that's, living their dream in Bali, but they're in a different time zone than you are. So what's your problem? Stop for a second and think to yourself, which of these 3 are the ones that are really keeping you up at night? Pick one of them to get started so you don't get overwhelmed. And then if you have more than one, when you're looking at platforms, make sure to see whether or not they can solve more than one at the same time. All right, so we've talked about your business problem. So now it's time to talk about how you transition into finding a solution to that business problem. So on the tech side, that could be a platform. Maybe it's a mobile app. Maybe it's a marketplace. Maybe it's a custom built solution. So we're going to talk through each of those so you can kind of understand when you're evaluating solutions, which ones are best for your business in general, and then start looking into the specifics. So first of all, what's a platform? Well, there's a lot of definitions out there, but this is mine. It's a collection of services shared by users, usually by the web or a mobile app and or an API. API is more complicated, so we won't cover that today, but that's for completeness of definition. But why do you care? That's a pretty generic, very techie kind of description of a platform. What I think matters about what's happened in the last decade in terms of technology becoming platforms is that it's a much cheaper way for everyone to take advantage of advanced technology. You can have chatbots that automatically detect things like where they're from and respond accordingly, and things like that, that previously you would have had to have hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars to roll out. And today you can go and trial these kinds of things for free. They also allow you to self-configure rather than custom build. So that's the key difference, and that's why platforms are amazing. Of course, we're going to talk about the downsides of platforms, but this is the opportunity that platforms represent for your small travel business. Okay, so now we kind of have an idea of what a platform is. It is this thing that is being offered out there, like a Facebook is a platform, YouLi is a platform, and Stripe is a platform for payments. So they tend to be quite specialized, but they connect together. MailChimp is a platform for sending email. So as you can start to see, all of these things are specializing in their particular areas and then connecting together. But one thing that a lot of people are probably thinking is that apps, mobile apps is what you need. And maybe you do need a mobile app, maybe you don't. That's something you'll need to look into for your business, but you'll want to think about whether or not you actually can get your customers to download an app. It is one of the most difficult things to do today. People have hundreds of apps on their phones and most of them don't get used. So today there's a nuance of web apps, and that's what YouLi is. It basically means they can click on a link from an email, it opens in their browser on their phone, and it works natively on their phone, but doesn't require them to download an app. It does require an internet connection usually, but it's a much better user experience than forcing someone to download an app, or that horrible experience when you try to open that app and it's like, hey, you need to update before you can use this, but you're traveling, so you don't have the bandwidth to update your app. So then it becomes useless. Whereas with a responsive web app, you click on it, it loads up, it's the current version always. So there's pros and cons to mobile apps versus responsive web apps, and you just need to understand what problem you're trying to solve if you think you need a mobile app as compared to a responsive web app. And finally, marketplaces. So marketplaces are really just specialized platforms. So this is Airbnb, this is Tour Radar. To some degree, it could be TripAdvisor, although they're really more of a referral platform. And this is connecting buyers to sellers. And usually a commission is taken between those two transactions. So you need to decide whether or not you're looking for a standalone platform that's sort of your brand, or you're interested in the leads regardless of the brand and you're willing to kind of be on their marketplace. Because remember, their brand is always prominent on the marketplace, but on the platform, it's your brand. And of course, the final option is custom built. What I'm talking about is being able to go sign up for something that's already been built that you can kind of get started with right away. But of course, you can always choose to custom build. And, but my suggestion these days is go take a look at what's out there, what platforms and marketplaces exist before you even begin to consider custom building. Because the last thing you want to do is custom build something that someone's already built, and you could pay $20 a month to get something that would cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to build yourself. Okay, let's talk costs. So I've told you that platforms are amazing, but what do they actually cost? They are cheaper than building it yourself, but they're not free. So I'm using an acronym here called SaaS, which is software as a service. That's sort of an older term for platforms, but it's more specific. It basically means you're renting the software instead of buying an old school CD that you put on your computer. So white labeled SaaS is like us. So YouLi is white labeled SaaS, MailChimp is, Typeform is, Resdi is. We all have subscription fees. So when you sign up, you basically pay us a monthly fee, and then you could use our technology as if it's your technology. You put your logo on it, your domain on it, and we just make sure all that stuff is running behind the scenes all the time, and you pay us a flat monthly or annual fee for that. Then there's marketplaces. These would be your Tour Radars, your Retreat.guru, your Airbnb. These take booking fees or commission fees every time a transaction comes through. These can be awesome because you don't pay anything up front and you only pay when you get a booking. So this really depends on where your cash flow is. They will be more expensive in terms of total cost of ownership, which is at the end of the worksheet that I gave you, is to think about realistically whether or not it makes sense for your business to pay the higher booking fee or to commit to a regular subscription fee. And it really just depends on what your cash flow situation is and whether or not you have a regular audience or you need the marketplace to be driving that audience for you. And finally, platforms that are driven by ads. These look like they're free. These are your Facebooks, your Instagrams, your TripAdvisors. Technically, you as a business don't need to pay anything to be on those platforms. However, you are paying in a different way. So you pay because the audience that you're building on those platforms can be distracted off to other competitors at any time, and you have no control over that. So you could build, let's say, a Facebook group, and you could spend years collecting that kind of really committed audience. And at any time, Facebook can decide that they're going to target your group with ads for your competitors. And there's nothing you can do about that. So, there's pros and cons. It's an incredibly powerful platform, and it costs you no money up front. However, it's a huge business risk if you're looking to scale on it. So this is getting back to thinking about the total cost of ownership and at what point it makes sense to move off of ad-based platforms in terms of your core audience. Now, of course, you can't ever completely get away from Facebook and Instagram because that's where the people are, but you want to be aware of the risk that you're taking on as you're building audiences in those spaces and thinking about what you would do if they did change their policies. Excuse me. So let's talk about choosing platforms. So I'm just kind of giving you an idea of the purchasing mentality in terms of how you're paying for these, but how do you decide which one you actually want to buy? So questions to ask: how much does it cost to get started? Now, most of them are free to start, which is amazing. But how much does it cost to scale? So how quickly are they going to start charging you? And again, thinking about that total cost of ownership, the TCO. So maybe it's free to start, but as soon as it gets integrated into your processes, they, 10x the price. So just make sure that you don't just make a decision based on the getting started price, but look at the full roadmap of how much money you're going to spend, because most of these platforms are going to be in your business for years and you plan to grow. So make sure that that platform is going to grow with you and it's not going to actually cost you way more than you can afford as you get bigger. Now, integrations with your website is key. You need to be looking at how these pieces of technology are going to fit into the tech that you already have. Same thing with your email. How is it going to connect into your email? How are you going to know when things happen on this platform? And then, of course, whatever else you have in your tech stack. So as we saw in our list, you got a lot of stuff going on, right? How is the new piece of technology going to integrate with that? If it's important, then it needs to talk to that piece of technology, or it needs to have some sort of path to do so in the future. Now, one thing to take a look at is a thing called Zapier. As you get bigger, if you're going crazy moving things between systems by hand, you might want to look into a Zapier subscription, and you can actually automate when something happens on MailChimp, trigger something to happen on your CRM, for example. So you can keep those two systems in sync. And so this is something that you can do if they don't automatically talk to each other. Sometimes Zapier can be the thing that connects the two together. It's a super powerful, exciting tool, and I'm tempted to kind of do a webinar on it all by itself. Now, finally, data. Now, we've been talking about sort of functionality, like email capabilities, analytics to let you know what's going on your platform, Typeform allowing you to collect information and preferences. But where does that data go? And who owns it? You need to stop and think about that when you're making these decisions. When you're choosing a platform, consider whether or not the data that you collect on your customers is data that you own or data that the platform owns. Now, either one can be an acceptable decision for the business, but you need to make it consciously. Also because the more data compliance regulation comes out, the more and more the regulators are going to expect you to know and have documented in your privacy policy how that data is handled. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. Now, payment gateways. I love this topic because this space is changing constantly. So this slide will be out of date next month, I'm sure. But basically, when you're looking at payment gateways, so payment gateways are the way that you get paid online, usually via credit cards, although a lot of these also support like WeChat type payments and things like that as various countries implement new kinds of payment methods besides just credit cards. But the core ones that have really dominated right now are Square and Stripe. They are really taking over from PayPal, and they are the ones that we prefer on the YouLi platform as well. So payment gateways, how do they charge? Well, they charge per transaction, and the transaction fee varies per charge type. So you do need to watch out for this, especially with foreign transactions. So if you're an Australian business and you're charging in US dollars, you need to be careful because when that money settles into your bank account, they're going to charge you a foreign transaction fee. So just make sure you're aware of what that is and that that is the right amount for you. But one of the really cool things that's just happened in the last 6 months is a company called TransferWise has gotten really big. And you now, as an Australian business, or really any business, can open a US dollar account under TransferWise. So you can set up your Stripe account for free in US dollars, and it can settle into a TransferWise US dollar account, and you can pay your suppliers directly out of there. And you don't have to take any foreign transaction hit until you're ready to settle your profit to your Australian account. If none of that made any sense, that might be something you guys want to book in a sort of one-on-one consultation about. This stuff is really exciting, and the things that you can do now as an international travel business are changing every day. It's very exciting. So the other thing to think about is reputation. So you'll notice that WeTravel and Eventbrite are up here as payment gateways. They're not just payment gateways. They are platforms that provide booking services. WeTravel for multi-day retreats and Eventbrite for just sort of one-off events. But they got big enough that they actually, well, Eventbrite built their own payment gateway. WeTravel white labels someone else's. But the thing that you have to recognize is that you don't get a choice in terms of reputation. If you use them, it is their payment gateway reputation that is being used. And we've had people tell us that sometimes they'll get credit cards rejected on there because maybe there was a lot of fraud that happened from a different client on the same payment gateway at the same time. So you don't control the reputation when you're on those sort of payment gateways, whereas with Stripe and Square, it's your reputation. So sure, it takes time to build it, but once you've built it, it's yours. So pros and cons, as always with business, there's never a straight answer, but it's something to keep in mind. And finally, terms of service. So watch out, if you're selling flights, not all of the payment gateways out there will allow you to do that under the terms and conditions. There's various reasons for this, but watch out for that and just be conscious of which payment gateway you choose so that it's clear whether or not you have the right to sell flights and take payments on that platform. Now, on that point, if it's against the terms of service and you do it anyway, be aware that they can shut you down at any time. So make sure you have a backup. But the great thing is, because there's so many out there, it is actually pretty easy to have a backup these days. All right, booking platforms. Love these, obviously, because we built one. So YouLi is the booking platform that we run, and it is for multi-day, mostly group travel experiences, but also unique experiences built, custom built. Oh, I've got some sort of automation problem here, so I'm just gonna double check on that. And it seems to want to jump past here, but the thing here to really think about is the commission and booking fees, which we talked about before. If there are options other than credit cards, which we talked about the payment gateways, that's mostly credit cards, but maybe you also want to do Venmo, maybe you want to do just direct bank transfer, maybe you want to accept a check in the mail. So make sure that your booking platforms allow other mechanisms for payment. We talked a bit about the reputation, and also double check whether or not they have an exclusivity agreement. So a lot of these platforms, well, not actually, I think only one platform that I've come across so far has this, but it was a bit of a surprise. You shouldn't need an exclusivity agreement. You're a travel business, you need to be on as many platforms as you need to be on. There's too many choices. Don't sign an exclusivity agreement. And finally, what happens after the booking is made? I think this is something that is often forgotten when you're kind of in that eager mode of get a booking, get a booking, get a booking. But if the answer is then download to a spreadsheet managed from there, then you might want to look for a booking platform that is more extensive than that. So make sure you're considering the complete customer experience, not just get the booking and then I'll figure it out. That's fine to get started, but you're going to rapidly need to consider how to actually smooth out that process post-booking. Now, finally, I'm just actually going to switch through this because we already talked through a lot of this. So I'm going to just going to jump in here, actually, and go to this one. So I want to talk through data because we talked about this earlier. And so one of the things is, regardless of what you choose, right? Regardless of the booking platform that you use, regardless of whether or not you have a mobile app, regardless of whether or not you have a marketplace, maybe you have all of them. But what's really important when you're making these decisions is thinking about your data as a holistic thing that runs across all of them. And this can be one of the biggest challenges as a sort of non-tech business person. You may not understand how that all works, but you need to start thinking about your data. And one of the things that I find really helpful is, instead of thinking data as like a big concept, think about it in 3 different categories. Think about analytics, and this is your data that tells you things like, how many page hits am I getting? What countries are they from? What devices are they on? How long does it take between when they look at the page and when they actually make a booking? So analytics data tends to be anonymized, aggregated, and provide you insights. This can help you make decisions and is typically offered by an analytics platform. Free one being Google Analytics, but some paid ones being Heap, which is one that I like a lot, and Full Story or Hotjar, things like that. Second one is one that you guys probably think about a lot more, which is subscribers. So these are people that are on your email list. These are people who've made bookings. These are customers. You have personal information. And in travel, you often have very sensitive information. So this is things like passports, maybe even health data. Now, this information is very actionable. And because you have this kind of data, it can drive a lot of loyalty because you can really personalize these experiences. This is your audience. This is the piece that you need to control as much as you can. And more data privacy laws are making it so that you actually have to be quite responsible for this. So you should be expecting your platforms to be addressing those requirements from the privacy legislators in the EU, California, Australia, because if your tech platform's not doing it for you, it's going to be too difficult for you to do as a small business. So expect your platform to be telling you how they're taking care of the personal information that they're collecting. And then the final one is content. So this is something that people don't always think of as data, and privacy legislation doesn't care about this kind of data, but this is your content. This is your product. These are the photos that you've taken on your trips. These are the itineraries that you've built. This is your website content. This is your intellectual property. It needs to be accessible because you need people to see it and access it. And it's what demonstrates the value that you're putting out into the world. Recognize that you need to protect that and sort of nurture that, kind of like a garden. Is one of the ways I like to look at it, because you grow it over time and it becomes really rich and really complicated in some ways. So make sure that as you're moving from platform to platform or picking a provider, that you understand how they're protecting your content and how you will get it back out in case you need to switch, but also make sure you're backing it up. So something people forget often, especially with websites, if you're not backing it up, if something goes wrong with your provider, you can lose everything that you've built over the years. So all three of these are important. Subscribers being the one where the data legislation is focused, content being something that you as a business really need to recognize the value of and protect, and analytics is what's going to help you make the decisions to grow your business further. So again, the takeaway that I want you to have from this presentation is that you can take control of your tech stack. You can do this. I've had so many people say to me, I'm not techie. And that's fine. You don't have to be techie. You don't have to feel like you understand what SaaS really means, but you just have to understand that you are in control of your technology. These are your accounts. Demand your platforms to be accountable to you to make it easy enough for you to use, even though you're not techie. That is what's different with this generation of technology. Focus on your key business problem. Ask the right questions to buy the right platform for you. And then think about layering your tech over time so you don't get overwhelmed. Do one piece at a time, maybe once per quarter, or maybe have a yearly plan, however you structure your business. And then take a deep breath and just have confidence that you can do this. So that's it for me, and I'm happy to take any questions if there are any.
This is amazing, Jen. Thank you so much. I've been listening and thinking like, oh my God, there's so many things that if you just start in business, so if you partnering with somebody else in business, just having this structure in front of your eyes and thinking, okay, it's a New Year's time, so let's take a break and sit down and think, what is it we're gonna do for the next year?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I hope that the worksheet is helpful as well to kind of get people thinking. I've encountered a lot of small business owners that when I say things to them like, okay, well, so where is your domain hosted? And I'll just be like, I don't know. And that's an incredible business risk because if you don't have the login credentials for that, if the guy who set that up for you has that and you don't, then they control your tech stack. And you should be in control of that.
Perfect. Thank you. That's somebody joining back in, I think.
Hey, Jeff.
I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody right now so people can speak if they want to.
Did everyone get access to the form? Was everyone able to load that up?
Oh, well, I was on my phone, so I'll have a look at it later.
Yeah, No worries. Hey, Rosie, were you able to get onto that?
I am open to chat and then yeah, I'm trying.
All right. Well, give it a try later on and let us know what you think. And if any kind of questions come out of that, we can be booked for one-on-one consultations on this to kind of understand how YouLi will kind of fit into your existing tech stack.